There's some parts of Pepsi's story that might surprise you on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Caleb Davis Bradham was born in North Carolina in 1867. By 1880, Caleb is only 13 here. We see his dad George Washington Bradham, who's a farmer, his mom Julia, and his sister Josephine. After graduating from the University of North Carolina, Bradham attended the University of Maryland School of Medicine in hopes of becoming a doctor. While he was attending school, he worked part-time as a pharmacy apprentice at a local drugstore. Caleb needed to come back to North Carolina for an unknown family issue. When he got back, he taught school for a little while, and then he opened a drugstore on the corner of Middle and Pollock Streets in New Bern, North Carolina, called Bradham's Drugstore. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But here are some of his pharmacy bottles. In 1893, he invented the concoction known as Brad's Drink, made from a mixture of water, sugar, caramel, lemon oil, nutmeg, and some say it included vanilla and cola nut. Later that same year, his dad died. A few years later, in 1898, Bradham renamed his drink Pepsi Cola. He had bought that name, Pepsi Cola, for $100 from a competitor from Newark, New Jersey that had gone broke. Now everybody, including me, always thought that the reason why it was called Pepsi was because it had pepsin in it. Well, it didn't. Now, it was a concoction designed to help with digestion, and other sources do say that it was supposed to work the same way that pepsin does, hence the name. But it could also possibly stem from the word dyspepsia, which means indigestion. It became very popular very quickly, as it seems almost every other cola out there did. This was just the cola era, it seems. So begins America's love of sodas, right? Who knew that colas were going to grab a hold of society and hold on so tightly for so long? Here in 1900, Caleb is 33. He's still single. He's living with his mom, who's 60. He's listed as a druggist. 2 years later, at the end of 1902, the Pepsi Cola Company was formed. The following year, in 1903, Pepsi Cola became an official trademark. By 1904, the Pepsi Cola syrup sales reached almost 20,000 gallons. Caleb decided that it's time to start bottling his own Pepsi Cola, and in 1904 he bought the Bishop Mill on the corner of Johnson and Hancock Street and converted it into his bottling plant for Pepsi Cola. In 1907, he purchased some more land and he built a 3-story addition to the factory to serve as the office space for his new company. This is that corner, but it isn't the same building. Now, here's a 1904 directory. He's still listed as a druggist, and like I said, his drugstore was at the corner of Middle and Pollock, which look like this. Neither of these gentlemen are Caleb Bradham, and this is what the pharmacy looked like today. On those blue awnings, it says the birthplace of Pepsi Cola. And in the window, it still says Bradham's Pharmacy in similar script. And there's a little historic monument on the sidewalk there, which is cool. It doesn't look like they have a website, but they do have a Facebook page where they show some photos of what it looks like inside, and it's just filled with memorabilia. Now here's a patent for a shipping tag that Caleb Bradham filed for in February of 1906. And here's a 1907 directory that shows Caleb Bradham is the proprietor of Bradham's Pharmacy and president of Pepsi Cola Incorporated. Now this is interesting. In 1909, this is a Savannah, Georgia directory, and it lists Bradham as being vice president of Pepsi Cola. I suppose he opened another shop there, but he had someone else running it, which is why he's listed as vice president of that one. I didn't really find any information about that specifically. By 1910, there were 240 franchises around the United States, and he was selling it in grocery stores all over the place. We see in the 1910 census, he's 42 now, his wife is Charity, and they have 3 kids, and his mom is living with him as well. He still lists himself as a druggist in the census. If you were only going by census records, you would have never known that he had anything to do with Pepsi. And he's simultaneously listed in the Savannah 1910 directory, still vice president there. It says he resides in North Carolina. So 1914, he's president of Bradham Drug Company and president of Pepsi Cola and vice president of the People's Bank. Notice the little ad in the directory now? It says manufacturers of Coladine, Anway's Croup Syrup, Carolina Cough Cure, Laxative Chill Tonic, and Hewler's Candies. 4 years later, everything's exactly the same. The ad now says fine stationery, confectionery, ice cream, and soda fountain drinks, fine cigars, more candies, and it says he has a second store right down the road. So now we're up to World War I. The war hit all of the soda companies really hard. The rationing of sugar put all the soda companies into a really tight squeeze for a while. Pepsi was no different. The demand was really high, and everyone had a hard time keeping up. Bradham tried to find substitutes for sugar, like molasses, but nothing tasted the same as the original. Sugar prices soared from 3 cents a pound to a record 28 cents per pound. Bradham felt like he had no choice, and he purchased a large quantity of the high-priced sugar. Well, a few weeks later, the prices dropped to 5 cents a pound. So he was stuck with all this super expensive sugar, and he couldn't sell it for the prices that he needed to break even. This is an ad from 1919 about the same time, and it says, "Zoom over your troubles with a glass of Pepsi Cola." Which is ironic because Pepsi Cola officially went bankrupt in 1923, and its trademark and the secret recipe were sold to Craven Holding Corporation for $30,000. Caleb Bradham just returned to his drugstore. We can see in 1926 that he's only listed with Bradham Drug Company, and his son, Caleb Jr., is old enough to work now. George W. is there. That's Caleb's other son, named after Caleb's dad. And that's the end of the Pepsi story for Caleb Bradham. That's not as glamorous as I was expecting. He died in 1934 at the age of 66. His gravestone has a really pretty engraving that says "Inventor of Pepsi Cola" on it. His obituary says that he was in the Navy Reserve for 25 years, and he was also involved with many local organizations. In 1931, Pepsi was sold to a candy manufacturer in New York, and his name was Charles Guth. A few years later, Guth moved Pepsi operations to New York, and then he had his chemists reformulate the Pepsi recipe. In 1940, Pepsi made history when the first advertising jingle was broadcast nationally. The jingle was called Nickel Nickel. Here, take a listen.
Pepsi Cola, it's the pot, 12 ounces, that's a lot, twice as much for a nickel too. Pepsi Cola is the drink for you. Nickel, 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 nickel.
One of the commenters on the video says, "I remember when my grandparents would sing or hum this jingle." Another commenter says his grandpa would tell him of the time when he would go to the movies and spend a whole afternoon for a dime. That actually reminds me of when my grandma said the same thing. She would go to the movie theater, it cost her a nickel to get in, and then another nickel would buy you either a popcorn or a huge candy bar. So, a little bit about his sons. I found Caleb Jr. living in New York working at Pepsi during World War II in the 1940s. His brother George stayed back in North Carolina. Now, Caleb doesn't stay in New York for too long because we see him back in North Carolina in 1958 as a manager of Van Orange Company. It sounds like another soda company, but I can't find any information about it anywhere. In 1965, Pepsi Cola merged with Frito-Lay. And in the last 20 years, Pepsi has acquired many big companies like Tropicana, Quaker Oats, Gatorade, Chewy granola bars, and Aunt Jemima. So my bottle is an ACL, that means Applied Color Label. It's a 10-ounce bottle with a swirl design, and according to this diagram, this design started in 1958, and it ran through the 60s because some of the 60s commercials that I found still have this design bottle. The bottom says 73, it's possible that that could be the date. And that's about it for me. I did find a few commercials for you, so enjoy those, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Be sociable, look smart, keep up to date with Pepsi. Drink light, refreshing Pepsi. Stay young and fair and debonair. Be sociable, have a Pepsi. Be sociable, have a Pepsi.
Have you noticed? You hear something new at fountains today. People who think young say, Pepsi, please.
The lively crowd today agrees. Those who think young say, Pepsi, please. They picked the right one, the modern light one. Now it's Pepsi for those who think young. When you say Pepsi, please, you're putting yourself among people who like their leisure. With Pepsi, the drink that's young. So go ahead and pick the drink that lets you drink young as you think. Yet get the right one, the modern light one. Now it's Pepsi for those who think young.
There's a whole new way of living. Pepsi helps supply and drive. It's got a lot to give to those who like to live, 'cause Pepsi helps them come alive.